Hey everybody, John Ray with Musing Wizard. I am joined by Karl Brockman, and today we're going to be talking about redemption. One of the reasons that there's so much backlog of guilt and shame is that in our society, there is not a path always to redemption. One thing that draws people into religion and Christianity is that in things like Alcoholics Anonymous, in Christianity, in anything that is offering some kind of higher power that's set as an ideal to strive for, those systems still have a path to redemption. They still have something akin to forgiveness, and so you can make mistakes, you can do wrongs, and you can come out the other end a changed person, wiser for having gone through those things, learning and feeling through all the big feelings of that, and then show up still as a productive member of society. But unfortunately, in the nihilistic, material driven, woke kind of mind virus that has taken over much of mainstream communication and news, and really the meta on social media. Oftentimes we want to put people into a guilt box and never let them out. And I feel like a lot of the contentious nature of our society politically and on many levels exist from a lack of a path for redemption. And so today we're going to talk about what that path could look like, why it's interesting, what that path has looked like for me and perhaps for Karl. And you can let us know in the comments what your path to redemption has looked like. But Karl, what is redemption to you? What do you think we should dive into? Thanks for being here.
Good morning, John. Thanks for having me as always. What is redemption for me? You mentioned that we seem to be quick as a society to put people in a guilt box. I really liked that. When I think about redemption, I think about the guilt box that I put myself in. We've spoken about times in our lives where we might have been more of that vagabond, the partier, I won't speak for you or me, but some people take drugs and drink alcohol and do all of those things during that time. And yeah, even though it's a fun time in our lives, we definitely aren't our best selves and perhaps aren't treating the people that we love in a great way, or people in general in a great way, definitely not treating ourselves in a great way. And I know that there was a lot of guilt, shame, remorse that was built up for me anyway during those parts of my life as I strayed off the path as I see it. There's definitely a place that I still enjoy going out, enjoying a time with some great friends, letting taking the high heels off for a second and letting the breeze take us to some fun places. However, to do that from a much more conscious and centered place for me is really important anyway, and helps me better discern how I'm behaving or acting in those times. But yeah, that guilt box is something very interesting. My favorite comedian, Louis C.K., is a beautiful example of cancel culture. For those that don't know, Louis C.K. is a comedian. He's one of the greats according to comedians and according to me, if that matters. And he was found to be touching himself while on the phone to a lady, and also was found to have a habit of behavior where it could have been seen that he was using his influence to stroke to mind the pun, to stroke some of the urges that he has. And he got completely cancelled and removed from the I guess the platforms of society. He went into a little bit of a hole for a couple of years, and I can only imagine what that hole would have been like for him. And on the back end, he now used it as a platform to share all of his comedy on his own website behind a paywall. His redemption story has been quite fascinating. The first line in his first stand-up act back was about the thing. He just called it out immediately and made a joke of it, and got into what he does best. And I found, well, to watch that from the outside looking in, I found that inspiring. Like, yeah, that's a part of it, of himself that he had to account for in some ways, and yet he didn't let the backlash or the buzz stop him from doing what he loves and continue to move forward. He actually catalyzed that into something that better serves him, better serves his audience, and I thought was a beautiful redemption arc. So yeah, that's what makes me think about the guilt box we put ourselves in, you know, to work through and to level up from some of the things that we're not, I guess, proud of, right? And even not in those party phases, in our teenage years, in our adolescence, in our 20s, if we're 50 listening to this, you know, that for me, that's what a midlife crisis is. It's like you wake up. I had mine at 25, but you wake up and you're like, what have I been doing? What is going on? What that for me offers an opportunity for redemption. And yeah, that lack of path is something really interesting that I'm curious to dive into too, John. But what about you, man? What's redemption for you?
Yeah, well, I think, that's an interesting story of somebody who, took grave in many ways, like those were inappropriate actions. And so I think we need to define that there is a kind of commercial redemption that's available. I would say that Louis CK has had somewhat of a commercial redemption. And then there's also like a spiritual redemption, and we can debate whether or not he's actually had a spiritual redemption. And I think at its core, things like locking someone up. Like, why do we lock somebody up? Well, one, we don't want them to be a harm to themselves or others anymore, and so that's part of it. But really, like, part of being in lockup is the same reason that we put a child in timeout. You need to think about what you've done, and so really a better way to say it would be you need to feel through what you've done, and so cancel culture and all of these things, I think, are trying conceptually, at an unconscious level, to force somebody to have to feel through the big feelings that the nodal network can tell, are stuck. And you do not do something like Louis CK did, if you are fully present, if you aren't if you're locked into more of an optimistic narrative rather than a nihilistic narrative. And so, what do comedians do? Comedians are the translators of the shadow. Like they're taking darkness and they're exposing it in such a way that it's transmuted through laughter. But in order to get to that transmutation, they have to go to a dark place. And so it's to some extent unfair that we say, hey, we want you to go to that dark place, but don't do anything while you're there, only bring the laughter back. And so it's a have your cake and eat it too type thing. Yeah, you shouldn't be doing things that are inappropriate and that make people feel vulnerable, or actually making somebody a victim. Those are all semantics that can get argued on something other than this call. But ultimately, what we're interested in this call is, at a spiritual level, why would somebody even make a decision that puts them in that place where they're cancelable? Because some people are not cancelable. Dave Chappelle is a good example of somebody who, he has a strong enough awareness of himself, and arguably has done a little bit more conscious reflection, and therefore he has positioned himself to be more bulletproof. And I think that somebody like Louis C.K. comes out the other end of this being more positioned in such a way where he can't be canceled in the future. That's why he's releasing stuff on his own network. But that's a commercial redemption. And the spiritual dimension calls for its own type of redemption, which is actually more akin to forgiveness. And I think that whether you're religious or not, a program like the 12-step program is an interesting path to that type of spiritual redemption. And we're all addicted to something. Like, people think that 12-step programs are only for alcoholics and drug addicts, but You can be addicted to love. You can be addicted to masturbation. You can be addicted to novelty. You can be addicted to weird situations. Like there's a lot of things that we get addicted to, and the 12-step program is just a format for recognizing that we need to have an ideal that's larger than ourselves. That way we're not a nihilist. So that's one of the first things, accepting a higher power that allows you to not live in nihilism, to not feel uh that your actions are the result of just randomness or circumstance. Like when you have that higher aim, like we've talked about in the past, you orient yourself in a different way, and rather than feeling shame on the back end of an action, you'll feel it on the front end so that you don't actually take that action. And when we orient ourselves properly, our emotional guidance system has something that prevents us from doing things that ultimately are going to hurt other people. Now there's plenty of people who have been canceled, and the people that they didn't do anything that was actually offensive. It was just people making a political statement, and so that does happen. But almost always, not almost always, always it's a law of attraction event. So you can't get canceled without you being a vibrational match to the cancellation. And so that why do people get canceled by the people that they're constantly in opposition to? Because they're calling in that type of friction and opposition. And if they are guilty about anything, even if it just puts them at a 1% disadvantage from a 50-50 split of randomness, then they're going to be more likely to be on a negative EV path, and their law of attraction is going to call in something that showcases that negative EV, where if they're constantly feeling through their feelings, they're going to be on an EV positive path, and it's less likely that their choices will end up getting them canceled. And so, the Louis C.K. thing, I think, is something where Louis has work that he has to do at a spiritual level, and we don't know how much of a spiritual stance that he's taken, or at least I don't. Really, the only people that can know is each individual soul. But just because somebody has a commercial redemption doesn't mean that they had a spiritual redemption. And I think that's one of the reasons that cancel culture proliferates, because until people are willing to take personal responsibility at a soul level, then society has to cancel people at the capitalism level, at the level of commerce. And so that will continue to happen until people are willing to have a spiritual experience with themselves rather than wallowing in nihilism, which I think it's pretty apparent Louis C.K. was.
Yes, yes, I would definitely agree, yeah, also not sure as to whether or not he has gone on his own redemption journey on the back end of it. We can only read what we can read. The way he took accountability in his recent content and has diversed into stuff that really lights his muse, directing, writing, all of these things, again, has been inspirational to me. And of course, this isn't a justification of some of the things that put him in the position to be cancelled anyway. But yeah, the way I'm reading into that, John, is that yeah, we might be able to find redemption on the surface level or the commercial level or the capitalist level, but it just will not be sustainable unless it is spiritual redemption, unless it is eternal redemption for ourselves. As you said, if we haven't gone through this journey internally, then we will continue to attract these triggers, these things, these catalysms that give us the opportunity to sit in a timeout and to think and feel through what we've done.
Yeah. And ultimately, redemption requires radical honesty, and that's one of the pieces of a 12-step program is you got to start telling the truth, and you need to make amends with people. And so a lot of people, I think, when they have made a mistake, they don't realize that until they make those amends, and until they face what they've done and then feel through all of the guilt and shame that comes from that, it's so easy to compartmentalize it and say the past is the past, and I don't ever have to deal with that. And so then you don't ever really have a strong feeling that you have to feel through, be it because you've been able to move to a new city and get new friends. You don't ever have to look at that. one of the reasons that you have to make amends in a 12-step program and call people up that you know have wronged in some way is because in doing that, one, you are saying out loud that I'm attempting to turn a new leaf. But two, you are forced to feel through the embarrassment and shame of your past actions, and that releases it when you do it. It's not designed as a punishment, it's actually designed as an acupuncture needle to poke you where that energy got stuck in that moment. And so when we can decide to be honest, hey, I made a mistake, hey, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be better. um you know, that doesn't have to be necessarily at a public level. It can be one-on-one with the people that we feel that we've wronged. But doing that allows us to have a shift in our own emotional energy that then truly allows us to move forward with different law of attraction that will call in new experiences, and we won't constantly be looking over our shoulder of, are those people going to attack me again, are those people going to show up and be like, actually this guy's still a bad guy. Because even if they do attack us and say those things, if we are visibly being honest and from a genuine place, showcasing that we're attempting to turn a new leaf, we will win hearts and minds to our side because our energy is aligned with integrity. We are doing the work, we are feeling through our feelings, and crowd peanut galleries are going to do what peanut galleries do, but ultimately we will know inside of us whether we are aligned with a deeper level of personal responsibility or if we're still playing pendulum games.
Yeah, right. It's like, yeah, whether it's literally running away, like moving to a new city and getting a fresh start, or just yeah, the avoidance, uh the separation between yourself and these people or these experiences and putting them in a box, spiritually running away. You're right, it still orients our emotion, our action, how we rock up every day, how we show ourselves to the world. Even at an unconscious level, these things still carry through with us. You know, I see that as akin to our psyche, our consciousness. It's not always a, oh, this happened in the past, so now I'm going to act this way. It's more on the unconscious level if we've continued to push it into a box, move away from it. And I want to go back to just the guilt box for a second, because again, to to succumb, or what's the phrase that you use, to admit or to adhere to a higher power or an ideal or something worth living this life for, you know, to answer the question, what is this all about, or what's the point, and to actually have an answer that's worth moving towards. This chucks in your face all of the times in your life that you've missed the mark. And depending on how long perhaps this revelation for redemption has taken to come to you, or how long you've been pushing away or running away from these things of your life, will be akin to the gravity or the amount of shame, guilt, these negative emotions that come to the surface, and is not an easy thing to deal with, even in the micro. If you've just done something regretful and you've woken up a couple of days later, and it's just hitting your psyche, it can be painful. But that compounding interest over years, over a lifetime, can be very difficult for one to rock up and to move through.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the things that the guilt box is always like our own box, right? So people want to make us feel guilty. And so oftentimes in cancel culture, that's what's happening is somebody wants to make you feel guilty. But you can only feel guilty if you're guilty. And so a lot of narcissist personalities will compartmentalize away from that and just continue to double down on the fact I've done nothing wrong, and really there's a lot of guilt under there, but they're so disconnected from their own nervous system that they can't feel through it. And so then in order to win commercially, they have to double down on polarity, and so they have to make somebody their enemy in a stronger way, and then they can actually win commercially and have a commercial redemption by tapping into those pendulums and tapping into that polarity. But you will see that plays itself out over time as continued addiction, the same patterns showing back up, exhaustion, you know, health issues, like when we're not dealing with it at a spiritual level, and haven't allowed ourselves to have that spiritual redemption, then we ultimately have that caked into our nervous system, and it's preventing our energy from moving as efficiently as it otherwise would. And so we just have to always be aware that the redemption path is our path. No one else has to give it to us. However, the more often we can allow people to have their experience and to feel their feelings and encourage them to do so, the more that we will have a culture of redemption rather than it being a bunch of people that find it on their own and kind of have to rebuild on their own. And so the thing that everybody wants, you know, this concept of solidarity in community, well, really that comes from recognizing that the common bond that we all have, regardless of political ideology, regardless of the perspective that we're viewing reality, is that if we could all take personal responsibility for our own lives, we could all connect at that level of being willing to own our own feelings rather than project them forward. And that gets us into so much trouble. And that's, you know, most people are addicted to drama cycles, and so they're just constantly trying to attach themselves to whatever the latest piece of drama is. And so it's a long-winded way of saying that I guess the path of redemption does always live in you, and it is relational to you, and there is never an external oppressor that is forcing you to feel a certain way. What's forcing you to feel a certain way is that you're unwilling to feel through your feelings, because if you could feel through those feelings that you're feeling by people showing up in a certain way in your external, if you could feel that at the deepest level, those people would actually naturally gravitate to a different perspective about you, or they would just no longer be relevant in your field and in your life.
Yeah, you'll no longer attract them into your universe. The universe will no longer uh, assimilate with yours. I was thinking about the term you used, the detachment from your nervous system. I think that's very apt. That's very apt. You know, like I think I use unconscious. You know, like there's times in my life where I'm unconscious, or someone that I might come across, I might just, you know, that voice is a judge really quickly, like, oh, this person isn't really conscious. Like it could be a first thought, and yeah, the lack of consciousness or the detachment from your nervous system does mean that you are just living in your head, that you are either wow, Benzi, you're really gonna have to help me out today. Decompartmentalizing different things to just make them make sense logically, so you can continue to move forward, and therefore never truly be able to take personal responsibility, like you said, truly be able to find presence and understand your place in it all. And I also think about that relationship outwardly with the people that you love and the people that are in your life. You know, we all have the opportunity for redemption. It does start with ourselves, but how important support is for that journey, and for one to be able to assimilate with their own nervous system, can have better empathy for those around them and better support them on those journeys, and vice versa. You know, call in the support that you need because you are attuned, you are present, and you're developing that universe as you should, as aligns to your ideal.
Right. Well, and you're just more tactful in your responses when you're empathetic, right? Like Robert Downey Jr., I think, is an interesting guy who has kind of gone through some cancellation loops, and you know, was down and out as an addict, and had a lot of negative press around that, and then had a triumphant rise commercially because he dealt with that. And you can see in his interviews that he did some of the emotional work that's required for you to truly be in recovery, you know, as an addict and alcoholic, and that made him a more grounded person. And he, even in opposition, when people are opposing him in interviews, he has such a tactful way of responding, and shows up as such a gentleman because he is used to owning his emotions now, and so he doesn't fly off the rails, sometimes if somebody attacks him, and I think that's just like a signal of somebody who has done some work and recognizes that the redemption is within, and true forgiveness is forgiving self by feeling through all of the guilt and shame and getting to a place where you that no longer is weighing down your system, and then properly orienting yourself in such a way where when shame and guilt does come online, it's not past stuff that is signaling that it's ready to release, but rather it's a guidance system that's saying, hey, we're giving you an early signal this time so that you don't have to make the choice that ultimately is going to make you feel this way.
Yeah, yeah, it allows you to respond rather than to react. If we have a detachment of our nervous system, that challenge is a threat, and then we're in survival and we react to the stimuli. Whereas if we're able to better develop our alignment, our attunement, and be able to have that, I use space, but the container to take in the challenge, to feel through it, and then to alchemicalize it into a better response, makes a lot of sense. And yeah, what a good example of one who has done the work and therefore can hold themselves more effectively in those situations. I'm sure every single one of us can reflect on a time where we haven't reacted to the best way to something in our environment challenging us, and absolutely kicked ourselves afterwards. And that tells me, and especially in hindsight, that in that time in my life I wasn't attuned, I wasn't aligned, uh I didn't have a good relationship with my nervous system. I must have been somewhat detached because I saw the threat and reacted to it.
Yeah. And a lot of times people are not actually feeling through what comes up in their life. Rather they are pushing that away, and then at night they are decompressing with alcohol, or smoking pot or something, and so then they feel like, oh, I didn't respond in an angry way, so I'm fine. But actually, because they're not giving expression to what's there in a responsible way, they're just masking over it. They end up in that state of nihilism that ultimately results in a type of depression that's void of any energy or momentum, and almost always when you're in a depression, it's because you've lost your aim, you don't have a goal anymore, you don't have anything that you're working towards, and you have lost touch with your nervous system. You're unwilling to feel your own discomfort. Maybe you're afraid that there's too much there, that the darkness will last forever, and that's never the case. There's always something on the other side of that. You just have to have the courage to go through it and to ride the bull of it and to take personal responsibility for it rather than blaming people.
Beautifully said. The courage to ask for help. There are so many people willing to hold your hand, to offer a perspective, even just to hold space as you work through and feel through some of these feelings, these things that trigger guilt and shame and the other negative emotions that we referred to. I guess this is akin to your relationship with pride, and it is one to be prideful that I don't need anyone. I can work through this myself. And look, you might be able to, and maybe it'll take a little bit longer than if you just had the courage at the time and where you needed it to ask for help. That's something that I reflect on in some of my darkest times. I was one that did use the beautiful leaf of marijuana to decompress and to mask some of the negative feelings that I was that were orienting me, and yeah, it served me for an amount of time. And in hindsight, it was just my unwillingness to seek help or to be open and honest with those that I was being challenged by. I lost that aim. I lost that reason to get up in the morning, and all of the thinking in the world wasn't really going to solve that for me. It was definitely the feeling through the emotions I was masking. But in hindsight, I just wish I asked for help. You know,
Yeah.
that it would have, even if that person that I reached out to or that service that I reached out to didn't give me a direct answer or solve all of my problems, being able to, like you said, to have a an opportunity to let some of this stuff out and not just have it all circling in my psyche and not having a process to work through it would have been an amazing catalyst for me to move through some of these feelings a bit quicker and get out of that funk.
Yeah. And I think for people that don't have or don't feel like they have somebody to vent to in that way, this is a great use case of prayer. Like that's what God can be there for. And whether you're praying into your journal or whether you're praying out loud or whether you're screaming at the top of your lungs to God, like God, the concept of God that I utilize is that God is so loving that even when I direct all of my anger at him, he's able to immediately transmute it. And so rather than directing my and expressing my anger at other people and projecting it at them, I can project it at God and God will transmute it for me. And that allows me to still give expression to my anger. Without letting it fester in my system and become stagnated.
Really good call out. It's obviously something that I didn't have a relationship with during those times, and I guess as I've started experimenting with prayer and have found a definition of God that suits me, it's not something that has come up to be able to express these emotions to it, him, the universe, just outwardly in my own stillness and time with self. And definitely something that I'm interested in exploring. Should that time come up, I'm basically perfect now. I'm enlightened, so I don't think it'll happen tomorrow, John. But yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, just to ask yourself for help. Ask the ether for help. Express it, externalize it. Don't just why I'm such an avid fan of journaling. Journaling has served me in those times, and has served me so importantly in the last say 5 years as I've done it at most days, is that I'm able to get this shit out of me, like
Yeah.
get it somewhere that is just not circling here, that I can look at it, I can play with it, I can add to it, I can it can be objective to me. A mutual acquaintance of ours, Regan Gallagher, he challenged me a couple of years ago to record myself journaling about my fears. And I see this as I see this having a very similar relationship to what you just expressed as you can ask God for these things. Whoops, apologies. I just tried to leave the meeting. When you ask God for these things, uh, but to see myself talk about what I'm afraid of, what's going on, what things are holding me up, what things that I'm struggling with, I can almost again, it becomes objective. I can it's not imagine, but I can conceptualize it as a friend sharing it with me. And I found a lot of the time, like I would share a fear about money, for example. Being an entrepreneur isn't always rainbows and strolling through a field, holding hands and singing lullabies. Sometimes it can be quite challenging on your nervous system when it comes to money, especially. And to watch myself talk about those worries and those fears, a lot of the time I laugh. It's like, why are you afraid of that? Like, why are you worried about that? Why are you letting that get in the way of you rocking up and having a really good day today? And that was a really interesting exercise for me.
Right. Well, and once you've expressed the negative sentiment in the proper way, like the manifestation that you've gotten to the other side of it is laughter. And so you could argue that because somebody that's having a bad day right now is like, well, my bad day is not funny. And that's because you haven't expressed it yet. But the beauty of saying it aloud to a coach or a friend or to God or into the camera and then watching it back is that you're giving yourself a type of verbal expression that is allowing that energy to transmute itself back into creative potential. And once you've done that to a degree where that ickiness, those base level emotions are no longer in your nervous system, then you will look at the same thing that once felt like F everyone. I'm having such a bad day. I want to do murder. Like people know what it feels like to have a bad day, and that can so quickly transmute into just laughter about all of it. To the point where you are joking around about it, and that comes through proper expression. And when we are holding on to it, when we're not willing to talk to anybody about it, when we're not willing to scream into the pillow, when we're not willing to swing the axe, or I used to have a t-ball bat that I would just take to a pile of trash or my compost pile, and I would just get it all out of my body. And at the end of that, I would almost always be like, this is so silly what I'm doing right now. It's so hilarious. But it didn't feel hilarious when I started. And that's how you know that you've gotten through the energy packet and it's transmuted itself back into creativity.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, what's the alternative, right? You just carry it. You carry it into everything that you do, the people that you speak to, the tasks that you do that day. Even if it's a day off, you can't even enjoy your day off because you're just carrying that negative emotion, and the opportunity to express it, like you said, you can transmute it back into creative potential, and just rock up with a cleaner slate. The ability to speak to and share and get frustrated about my fears about money, and allow that to be felt through and looked at objectively, meant that, well, okay, well, I just need to make sure I do some money making tasks today, rather
Yeah.
than just being like, worried, oh, I've got this meeting coming up, okay, I'll do that, and rock up poorly to it. Okay, glad that's done. I'm gonna take it easy. I've got an hour. I'm just gonna go and do nothing, or I'm gonna twiddle my thumbs. I'm just gonna read some emails. Like you're carrying it through it. And as we've spoke, like one of my favorite laws of the universe is compounding interest. All of these things compound interest as you add the days together, the weeks together, the months together, the years together. And there's so many ways as well. I'm not one who has seen a therapist, but the opportunity to speak to someone to support you is so abundant these days. Some really close people in my life swear by their relationships with the therapist. I know BetterHelp's a really big one in the marketing over in the US, and it seems as easier than ever to book someone there. In Australia we have opportunities as well, just to speak to someone virtually. And if you need to go that far, there's your mental health centers as well. Beyond Blue is a big one in Australia. That for men, there's a lot of men's help locally too. If you get out, in my community here, we have Sam Parker founded a non-for-profit called Grab Life by the Balls. And most of the mornings each week, just a group of blokes just have a coffee at the beach and just speak about life. And it is just such a beautiful community there and available to anyone. Gold Cone donation if you want a sausage sizzle, awesome. What a good way to start the day. Bacon and egg sandwich, great. If not, just the opportunity, like we've just spoken about, to express. And the expression allows the space, allows the attunement to our nervous system to actually be on that path of redemption, whether it is in the macro. I've woken up today and spent 40 years just not being a good person, or man, last week was shit and I treated my missus like crap, and I've got to apologize to my mum because I was really short with her. Let me just get that out of the way today, and let's get back on track.
Yeah. And I think the closing thing could be, because I didn't have lunch today and I can feel myself getting hungry, so I'm gonna cut it short a little bit. But I think the closing thing is just recognizing that your path to redemption doesn't involve people outside of you. It starts inside of you, and you do the work inside of you, and then you will naturally attract whatever external circumstances need to happen for you to have your own redemption. But your job is simply to feel how the things that are showing up in your life feel, because if you're attracting someone, if people are still picketing your office, then that's anger, that's shame, that's disappointment, that's um resentment. Whatever the feeling that shows up for you, it's going to be different for everyone. That's what you need to feel through. And you will have really interesting experiences where those things seemingly just dissolve or transmute or change into something else, or you have a brilliant idea, and the way that you know it's a brilliant idea is because it's funny to you, and it's lighthearted, and those things will over time shift the movie screen of your life to be something that is once again an EV positive upward arc. And I do believe that you can have both a spiritual and a commercial redemption at the same time, but the commercial redemption it is not always included, or the soul redemption is not always included in the commercial redemption, because oftentimes commercial redemptions come out of a type of revenge energy. And of course that's energy that we can that we can harness and utilize for the sake of saying I told you so. But it doesn't mean that long term we're going to feel better about the situation inside of us. We may be able to compartmentalize and hide from what's underneath the surface for a very long time, but it will eventually catch up to us. And so I guess the thing that I worked out, as we were talking this through is that it doesn't matter if society has a path to redemption, because redemption happens inside each of us. And if we're willing to feel our feelings about how society is treating us, then we will naturally shift our law of attraction to be in alignment with who we are becoming. And if we don't become someone that is more tightly integrated into a higher aim, then we will continue to live in base level, or base emotional experiences. But the larger aim that we have for ourselves, the more that we connect into that, and the more that we feel through every moment that's showing up, the more that we just create our own redemption arc. And that is going to be even more satisfying than a revenge arc.
Absolutely. I love that you used the analogy of the movie screen, right? There's an awesome episode, if you haven't listened to it, on story that John and I did, and the power of story. And that's one thing that definitely sparked some of my imagination back in my life when I was in that nihilistic what was me sort of frame. Was that, well, I only got one of these things. What could all of this mean, and what could it lead to? If my life was a movie, then how does all of this trauma, this negative experience, this negative emotion, these shortcomings, these failures, these experiences in which I didn't show up my best, lead to the best parts of my story, the best parts of my life, the best parts of my movie? So yeah, for those that are struggling to create an ideal for themselves, you've got one of these. What's the ending of your movie? Yeah, like, do you want to be Superman, or do you want to be admin clerk 3 in the office?
Right. And
I know, cool experiment to run.
there's a great workbook that you can get on Amazon by Kate Manser, and I believe it's called Deathbed Meditations Handbook. And it is basically a practice that you go through where, when you are in a place of indecision or when you don't know what to do, you go into a meditation, you visualize yourself on your deathbed, and you put yourself in that place, and you say, on your deathbed, you're about to leave everything behind. How do you wish you would have chosen in that moment? What do you wish you would have done? How do you wish you would have shown up? And by going through that guided workbook, it can be a really good way to, one, get out of indecision, but two, kind of feel through some of the fears that you may not have even realized were compartmentalizing you from choosing what you actually wanted. And part of the spiritual redemption path is getting back into alignment with what you actually want, right? And so having some kind of a guided focus like that can be really, really valuable. Just search Kate Manser on Amazon, and you'll find that workbook. But Karl, any closing thoughts on redemption, or how it shows up individually or in society before we drop off?
You might die tomorrow.com.
Yes.
Not the most attractive title for a website, but yeah, excited to go explore that workbook. Yeah, they interviewed a ton of I guess elderly people on their deathbed, and they asked them about their life, and they all spoke about the things that they wish they did.
Yeah.
Like
And
those
and
regrets were the
and it really is all about, a little bit more context. Kate had a friend that worked with us at Google, and he died in an avalanche while he was climbing Mount Everest. And what an epic way to die. But also, like, he was like the most awesome person ever, and so it struck a lot of people. And so then Kate specifically went around and talked to people, who had lost loved ones, who were on their deathbed, and really kind of had to put herself in a, what am I working for, like, what am I working towards, like, I've had this false carrot that I'm moving towards, where really what I want is an adventure. I want to die in an avalanche on Mount Everest. Like, I want to die in an epic adventure, and I want to make sure that on my deathbed, if it is a traditional death, that I have no regrets. And I think, you know part of what being canceled does for us is it puts us in a situation where we do get to kind of hit the reset button, right? And in hitting the reset button, we can show up differently. We can make different choices. And if we're feeling through our feels, and if we're truly choosing the things that we're aligned with, that can honestly be the best thing that ever happened to us. So let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know how you've had your own redemption experience. We didn't even really tap into to the concept of forgiveness too much, but I think it's very akin to this, and it's mostly forgiving yourself. And I know a lot of people have a redemption process through religion, through getting baptized. I saw even Russell Brand was recently baptized, and so there's so many ways that you can activate this type of redemption, but ultimately it starts within yourself. So, Karl, I appreciate you helping unpack this as we explored this, and yeah, let us know what your own redemption process looked like in the comments, and we'll see you all in the next one.